Imagine the roar of a plane's engine suddenly stuttering, followed by a deafening explosion. And then, you're falling. You're plummeting through the sky at breakneck speed, screaming as the world spins uncontrollably around you. You brace for impact, but when it comes, you're left with only a sense of shock. And then, silence. That was the reality for one woman who would survive not only the crash, but also 11 days alone in the dense, unforgiving Amazon rainforest. This is the true story of Julian Koepke, whose extraordinary survival tale defies logic and will leave you questioning the strength of the human will to live. Welcome back to Whispers of Hope, where we share the world's most incredible survival stories. Today we recount a miraculous escape from death, set against the terrifying backdrop of the jungle, a tale of resilience, luck, and the unbreakable human spirit. It all began on Christmas Eve, 1971. Julian Koepke, a 17-year-old high school student, was flying with her mother to the Peruvian city of Pucallpa after a holiday in the Amazon rainforest. The flight was uneventful at first, and Julian was looking forward to returning home. As she sat in her seat, she had no way of knowing that her life was about to change forever. The plane, Lanza Flight 508, was a DC-6, and everything seemed perfectly normal. That was until they soared high above the jungle and the weather began to shift. Suddenly, dark clouds gathered in the distance, and within minutes the storm turned violent. The plane was rocked by heavy turbulence, and passengers began to panic as the engines sputtered. The sound of thunder was deafening, and lightning cracked through the sky, illuminating the dark storm clouds around them. A brilliant flash of light suddenly struck the plane, sending it into a deadly spiral. Lightning had struck the aircraft, causing it to break apart mid-air. In the chaos that followed, Julian was ejected from her seat, still strapped into her seatbelt. The violent crash threw her into the air, and she plummeted toward the earth. She would later describe the sensation as though the world was spinning uncontrollably around her as she hurtled through the sky. When she hit the ground, everything went dark. When Julian regained consciousness, the world around her was eerily quiet. She was lying on the jungle floor, alone, surrounded by thick foliage. The remnants of the plane were scattered across the forest, but there was no sign of her mother or any of the other passengers. Her heart raced as she scanned her surroundings, hoping for any signs of life. But there was only silence. She had survived the crash, but she was now alone in one of the deadliest environments on Earth, the Amazon rainforest. Julian checked her body for injuries. She had a small cut on her arm, but otherwise she seemed to be in relatively good condition, considering the circumstances. Her mind was racing, and fear began to set in. There was no one around to help her, and she had no idea where she was or how far she had fallen from the wreckage. The odds of survival seemed impossible. She quickly gathered what little was left of her composure and made her way to the wreckage. It was there that she found her first bit of nourishment, a small bottle of cola. It wasn't much, but it gave her the energy she needed to keep moving. The pain from her wound was starting to set in, but she ignored it. She had no choice but to push forward. As she ventured deeper into the jungle, she quickly realized that her situation was far worse than she had initially thought. She was completely alone, and the dense forest was a maze of thick trees and underbrush. The jungle was alive with sounds, howling animals, buzzing insects, and the constant rustle of leaves. She was disoriented and terrified, but she pressed on, knowing that her only chance of survival lay in her ability to keep moving forward. The first night in the jungle was one of sheer terror. Julianne was exhausted, hungry, and unable to sleep. The humidity was suffocating, and the sounds of the forest kept her on edge. In the darkness, every noise seemed amplified, every twig snap was a potential predator, every shadow a threat. But she refused to give up. She focused on staying calm and conserving her energy for the days ahead. Over the next few days, Julianne used her instincts to survive. Her father, a zoologist who had worked in the Amazon, had taught her the basics of survival in the jungle. She used her knowledge of the environment to avoid dangerous animals and to find food and water. She foraged for fruits and berries, occasionally drinking from streams. The water helped to quench her thirst, but it also left her vulnerable to the numerous parasites and bacteria that lived in the jungle's waters. Her wound, though initially minor, began to fester and become infected. She had no way of treating it properly, and the infection spread. The constant exposure to the humid tropical climate only made it worse, and the pain was relentless. Yet despite the suffering, Julianne pushed on. She knew that giving in to the pain would mean certain death. The days became a blur of hunger, exhaustion, and endless walking. With each passing hour, her body weakened, but her will to survive grew stronger. She kept telling herself that she had to keep moving, that she couldn't stop. If she stopped, she would die. By the 6th day, Julianne was nearing the end of her strength. Her body had become emaciated from the lack of food and water, and the infection in her arm was now severe. But in the distance, she thought she saw something, a flicker of movement in the jungle. She pushed herself toward it, clinging to the hope that it might be a sign of rescue. But it wasn't a rescue party. It was a group of vultures scavenging on the remains of the wreckage. Julianne's heart sank as she realized how dire her situation had become. No one was coming to help. She was truly alone. But then, on the 11th day of her harrowing journey, she stumbled upon a group of locals. They had been searching for her since the crash, and when they saw her, they immediately rushed to her side. They were stunned to see that she was alive. So many days in the jungle, with little more than her instincts and will to keep her going. They offered her food and water, and Julianne's body collapsed in relief. When Julianne was finally rescued, she was malnourished, severely dehydrated, and covered in insect bites. Her body was a shell of what it had once been. But she was alive. She had survived 11 days alone in one of the most unforgiving environments on Earth. Her story became a symbol of the strength of the human spirit and the power of determination. Julianne Kupska's survival was nothing short of miraculous. She later recounted her journey, emphasizing that survival wasn't just about the physical challenges of the jungle. It was about mental strength, the refusal to give up, and the instinct to keep moving forward despite the odds. Her incredible story would go on to inspire people around the world, and is a reminder that the human spirit can endure even the darkest of times. Her ordeal in the Amazon jungle was one of the most extraordinary survival stories ever told. But perhaps the most remarkable part of her journey was the way in which she overcame the psychological torment of isolation. It was not just the physical pain that she had to endure, but the mental anguish of being alone in a vast, terrifying wilderness. And yet, through it all, Julianne held on to hope, driven by an unyielding will to survive. Please like, comment, and subscribe. I will bring more interesting stories